This is one of over 500 assisted PNF stretching demonstrations that can be found as part of my 80 Days to Your Dream Body course, which is available to my channel members. If you'd like to see all of them, then consider becoming a member. But for right now, let's get our stretch on. And while we're resting, let's continue with our assisted PNF stretching demonstration. And during the last rest period, I showed you guys how to emphasize the long head of the triceps brachii group. Now, I'm going to be showing you how to work on the medial and lateral heads of the tricep brachii group. With regard to the triceps, the medial and lateral head are solely responsible for extension. And depending on which one we want to target, if we want to emphasize more of the medial compartment of the elbow, which is where the medial head of the triceps resides, we would take the patient into supination. If we want to target more of the lateral compartment of the elbow joint and the lateral head of the triceps brachii group, we're going to take the patient into pronation. Depending on if we just want to make this more of a deep stretch and focus just on the elbow joint, or if we want to get a little bit more superficial and incorporate the shoulder, there are a few different options that are available to us. If we wanted to get the shoulder involved as well, what we would do is we would work distal to proximal. So the way that we would do it is first, depending on what we wanted to work on, we would either go into pronation or supination of the forearm before going into elbow flexion, and then finally going into shoulder flexion. And then, if we wanted to strictly focus just on the elbow extensors and just on the medial and lateral heads of the tricep brachii group, instead of distal to proximal, we would just work proximal to distal, start with the elbow extension, and then go on to the either pronation or supination. So, with regard to the first one, if we wanted to get more superficial, if we wanted to target more of the medial head of the triceps brachii group, we're going to take the patient into supination. Then we're going to take the patient into elbow flexion. And then from here, we're going to go ahead, stabilize at the scapula, and take the patient into shoulder flexion. And then if they're really flexible, you may need to get your hip involved. That way we could take them a little bit more. If we wanted to target more of the proximal, or not the proximal, if we wanted to target more of the lateral head, then what we would do is we would take the patient into pronation of the forearm. So the first thing that we would do, his arm's all messed up right now. So we would go into pronation first, then we would go into elbow flexion, and then from here, we would go ahead, switch up our grip, and if they're very flexible, you would need to get your hip involved and take them into shoulder flexion. The PNF sequencing, we would initiate it from distal to proximal, but right now I'm going to show you guys how exactly we would isolate the distal fibers and how exactly we would just isolate the medial and lateral heads. So if we wanted to target the medial head, what we would do is first, we have a couple different options available with the hand positioning. We could go with an underhand supinated grip, or we could go with an overhand pronated grip. Really doesn't matter. The most important thing is we are just taking them into elbow flexion. So you want to get a nice deep amount of elbow flexion. And then if we wanted to target more of the medial compartment, we're going to then take the patient into forearm supination. Once we're in this position, we would instruct the patient to inhale, straighten out the elbow. They're going to inhale, go into elbow extension. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create some space at the elbow, take them deep into elbow flexion. And then we are going to instruct the patient to inhale and turn your palm toward the floor. They're going to inhale, go into forearm pronation. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create some space, take them deep into forearm supination. Then we're going to go and combine the movements. So we've already isolated them. It's time to integrate them together and instruct the patient to inhale and simultaneously straighten out your elbow and turn your palm toward the floor. They're going to inhale, go into elbow extension, pronation simultaneously. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create space and take them deep into elbow flexion, forearm supination. That is if we wanted to target the medial compartment of the triceps brachii group. If we wanted to target the lateral head of the triceps brachii group, now we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to go into elbow flexion first, then we're going to take them into forearm pronation. From here, we're going to instruct the patient to inhale, straighten out the elbow. They're going to inhale, go into elbow extension. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create some space, take them deep into elbow flexion. Then we're going to instruct the patient to inhale, turn your palm toward your shoulder. They're going to inhale, go into forearm supination. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create some space, take them deep into pronation. And then we're going to combine the two. So we're going to instruct the patient to inhale and simultaneously straighten out your elbow and turn your palm toward the table. They're going to inhale and simultaneously go into elbow extension, forearm supination. As they exhale and relax, we're going to traction to create space and simultaneously take them into elbow flexion and forearm pronation. That is if we wanted to get more into the deep fibers and really focus just on the elbow extensors and forearm pronators and supinators. With regard to these, though, depending on which one you target, if we are going to be focusing on the more superficial fibers, we're basically going to be emphasizing either the pronators or supinators, depending on which one we're working on. Whenever we take the patient into pronation, we're targeting the supinators. That's going to be the long and short head of the biceps brachii, as well as the supinator muscle and the brachioradialis. When we take a patient into supination, we're now going to be emphasizing the pronators. So we're going to be targeting the pronator teres, the pronator quadratus, and we will be getting the flexor carpi radialis and a little bit of the brachioradialis as well. Then at the elbow joint, regardless of the supination or pronation, we're targeting those triceps brachii group. If we are in supination, that is when we target the medial compartment and the medial head of the triceps brachii group. If we are in pronation, that's when we're going to target the lateral compartment of the elbow complex and the lateral head of the triceps brachii group. And then we will be getting a little bit of stretch in the anconeus as well and the long head of the triceps brachii group. If we are also going to be working more superficially and we're going to be working toward shoulder flexion, if that is the case, then in that situation, we're going to be getting a little bit of the long head of the triceps brachii group. We're going to be getting some of the latissimus dorsi muscle. We're also going to be getting some of the posterior deltoid. So there's a lot of different variations for this particular stretch, depending on what exactly you want to emphasize. But regardless of what you're emphasizing, just remember that when you're going into elbow flexion to stretch those elbow extensors, if you go into supination, you're going to be emphasizing the medial head of the triceps brachii group. If you go take them into pronation, you're going to be emphasizing the lateral head of the triceps brachii group. But that is all of the stretches for today. Those were the top 21 assisted PNF stretching positions in a side lying position. And then during the next PNF stretching demonstration, we're going to work a little bit more into side lying, but we're going to be getting into some of those smaller muscles that you may not work on an everyday basis. But these were the top 21 that you're going to use most frequently. For right now, our rest period is up. Time for the 8th and final set. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.